Guitar Business Radio is the podcast for the business of guitar, where you'll always get no reviews, no demos, and no idle chatter. From players to CEOs and in between. If you have a professional or business connection to the world of guitar, this show is your window to insight and information you won't get anywhere else. I'm Jeffrey D. Brown, and I approve this message. So let's get to it. From Guitar Business Media, welcome to episode 40 of GBR. And thanks for joining us on the show where we bypass the low-hanging fruit for something far more challenging, the business of guitar. And today, our very special guest on the show is none other than Michael Ciravolo, President and CEO of Schecter Guitars. And I have to tell you, Michael is definitely an unconventional CEO. He doesn't look the part, doesn't act the part. He's definitely not a suit. I cannot confirm that he owns a suit, but I can confirm that I won't even be asking him about it. There's just too many other more important things to talk about, and that's exactly what we'll be doing in just a moment. Now, just a quick plug about next week's show, where our guest will be John Haber, CEO of Alto Music, one of the top retailers in the music business, but there's a lot more that we'll be talking about on episode 41 of GBR, and you should have plenty of time to listen as a result of the long weekend, so anticipate that. And that, of course, will bring us full swing into the holiday season, and we have some very interesting shows planned for you that we're going to keep zipped up for the moment until we get a little bit closer. And be sure to stick around after today's interview for our highly respected Back of the Show segment, where we do a wrap-up and analysis and try to figure out some of the more profound aspects of our interview and what relevance there may be for the rest of us. Plus, it's always possible I might come up with something totally unexpected that may cause you to use foul language and throw things. Either way, it's usually well worth hanging around for those few extra minutes, which is really nothing compared to what you just listened to. So snuggle up with your new weighted blanket, if you have such a thing. And this is apparently a new discovery and a tremendous made-for-TV product that you can get for only, 300 payments of $99 or something. Please let me know if you have one of those weighted blankets and what all the hoopla is about. Would love to hear more. However, inasmuch as we've now descended to a place that's not necessarily in the best interest of this show, I think it's definitely time to move on to something completely different. Michael Ciravolo is the president and CEO of Schecter Guitars and has been for many years. Although he really didn't climb the corporate ladder in the traditional sense, he actually built the ladder. And more than 2 decades later, he's running one of the top-selling guitar companies in the world. He has a compelling story, and there's so much to talk about. So let's get to it as Michael Ciravolo joins us right here and right now. Michael, thanks so much for joining us on Guitar Business Radio today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to doing this.
Awesome. So we generally start off with something we call foundational. I can't get away from using that word, and so I guess I'm going to continue. But this is really about what you did in the first part of your life that set the stage for basically where you are today in terms of your career and business. So what can you tell us about it?
Well, I guess after playing in like a band when I was in 8th and 9th grade, not very good. I kind of came to the crossroad probably my freshman, sophomore year in high school, where I was either going to try to being a band or continue my path as trying to be a football player. And that I didn't get 6'2" or run a 4.3 40. And I kind of wised up and realized that girls seem to like guys in bands more than jocks. I kind of took that turn and decided to go at the band thing full time. And that kind of put me on the path, and never really played in a cover band per se. Always tried to write original songs, and it, come from a very musical city in New Orleans, which I didn't really appreciate or when I lived there. I didn't really understand that as I do now. But yeah, that was kind of the turning point in my career to to do that, to, pick up the guitar and try to make something with that.
Now, was most of that in high school years, or?
Yeah, I mean, it started probably freshman year of high school, and then the sophomore year was, I think I was sat down by my coach telling me I had to make a decision, so I made my decision.
And tell me a little bit about how that all manifested after high school and as you get into your 20s and that sort of thing.
Well, we sort of, the band at that point was called The Models, and kind of a punk new wave type band, but we wrote all our own songs, and we always seemed to be the second most popular band in the city. So even though New Orleans is, in the past decade or so, has become like a really musical hub where bands were, getting signed. Nine Inch Nails did their studio, the whole Anne Rice thing down there and everything. When we were starting out, it wasn't. You had to make a decision to go showcase for a record label, which meant us, renting a van and a trailer and driving to New York City to get in front of record executives. And we did that multiple times, got really close, and then had to make a decision that if we were going to really go for this, we were going to have to move either Los Angeles or New York. And after some debate, we actually chose Los Angeles and made the move out here.
So now, were you able to make a living at this? Did it pay any bills at all, or what?
No, making a living, no. It was actually a bill.
Oh,
we paid for our rehearsal room. We owned our own PA system, as we had to bring that to most of the clubs we played. Fortunately, a guy who owned a little small recording studio hired me to work in his music store called the Music Stop in kind of a suburb of New Orleans. So that was really my first foray into that side of the music business. Working a little store that had guitars, bass, drums, and was interesting to actually, go to that side of the counter. And I remember the first time actually opening a price book, to see what something I was buying actually cost. And that was kind of eye-opening.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. So you did that for a while. How did that part of your work proceed? You went to something else after that, and give me a sense of where you went from there.
No, actually worked at the Music Stop. Went with the store. We went to the Chicago NAMM show, which was, I think, 84. And then the summer 85 was the first and only time that NAMM had actually did a trade show in New Orleans, which I think they realized in the summer in New Orleans with the heat and humidity, and also putting guys with expense accounts and credit cards in a city that does not close, meaning the bars, was not a smart idea. I remember going to a morning, because I was actually interested in seeing the gear. I'd lived there and, did my share of partying, but to walk in a NAMM show floor at 10, 11, 12 and see it pretty much a ghost town, because people were in bars to 3, 4, 5 a.m. So yeah, they quickly decided no more New Orleans for the trade show.
I remember that. I did a few other shows when I was in medical media for a while, and I know exactly what you're talking about, and I think we experienced some of those as well.
Yeah, I would think New Orleans, Las Vegas, Atlantic City, those are not the ideal things with musicians and expense accounts to turn them loose in. But that was summer 85, and later, a month or so later, we had packed up and made arrangements, and two of the guys in the band moved to Los Angeles and found us an apartment. And August, September, we were dragging a trailer with our gear and kind of up and relocated to Los Angeles. And wow, I never thought I would still be living out here, but life you take a path, and it's been good.
So the Music Stop, that was in New Orleans?
Yeah, Metairie, a subdivision.
Yeah. Okay, got it. I know where that is. Sure. I kind of got my wires a little bit crossed, but it's still Saturday morning, so you got to have some excuse. So, okay, so now you get to L.A. What happens next?
We were new. We were not quite definitely not the hard rock element that was here. We arrived in late 85, early 86. And if you look back, that was definitely the hair metal bands.
Sure. Yeah.
Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, that stuff. And we had sort of changed from a sort of new wave sounding band to being a bit darker, and the trench coats and the smoke, and I guess would have been labeled goth. So we were a bit different than what was happening here. But thankfully, there was a scene going on in Los Angeles at the time. There were a couple of clubs, Scream being the main one that actually had that type of band. So besides the Sunset Strip stuff that we didn't fit in, we did find our niche in that, and it played and eventually got a record deal. But, again, music certainly didn't pay for the bills. And I had, immediately, because of my experience in a music store, worked part-time at various stores here until I finally landed a job at Lab Sound, which was a store here that catered to, at that point, everyone had to have a big, giant guitar rack and effects processors and switching systems, and that store catered to that clientele. And so that got my feet wet and entrenched in the retail side out here, and in the professional world too, as well, primarily. Yeah, it did help me cover our bills, and the band eventually started breaking out and getting their own apartments and everything. So that allowed me to do that also. And so that went on for a few years, or? A few years. We did records. We never became the next U2. So when the music stop closed down, I was fortunate. There's that little strip in Los Angeles or in Hollywood, right across from Guitar Center. There was probably at that point eight or 10 different music stores and repair shops, and most of which are gone now, sadly. I remember. But there was a store down the street when Lab Sound closed. There was a store called Sunset Custom Guitars that I knew a couple of guys that were working there, and I got hired there as the manager. And that is sort of my first, the store was actually owned, which I didn't know at the point, by Mr. Shibuya, who is the owner of Schecter. And that's sort of my introduction to him. Okay. Now, tell me a little bit about Sunset Custom Guitars. What did they do? I mean, were they actually building their own guitars, or was it retail, or what? It was a retail store. Its sister store was 48th Street Custom, which was popular in New York City. Sure. But it was a store. We had some new product, a lot of vintage guitars. We also had on-site repair and customizing guitars and stuff. So it was kind of a shop like that, really a guitar store that catered a lot to the students from, I think at that point it wasn't Musicians Institute, but it became Musicians. It was GIT, I think. Oh yeah. And then it changed the name. But yeah, we catered to a lot of those students. I became pretty familiar with guitar customization and also vintage guitars, which we kind of bought and sold a lot of those. Mm-hmm. So your relationship with Mr. Shibuya ultimately brought you to Schecter, and how exactly did that occur? Well, I have to say, looking back at that, it was certainly right place, right time. And it really wasn't something that I had, that was never my dream. I wanted to be the guy on stage. And, as you get older and it starts going, you do start looking for plan B. And he owned Schecter, and Schecter at that point was really small. It was actually run out of the store. They had a small office in the back. And it just happened very strangely. The guy that Dave Hill that was running Schecter actually was helping Mr. Shibuya purchase Musicians Institute, or GIT at that point, right, and kind of left a void. And there was a NAMM show coming up, and we were putting together a couple of custom Schecters for the show. And at that point, we had sent a deposit in to to display at NAMM, and I was told if we can get the money back, then we wouldn't display at the show. And I remember calling the lady at NAMM, just as this green kid going, "Hey, can we get our money back?" And she's like, "No." And then I was told, well, you handle and you bring the stuff and you display at NAMM. And it was really that.
Wow.
It was, if she would have said, "Sure, here, we're going to send you a $2,500 deposit back," Schecter might have not continued. It's really, and when I look back at that, it certainly
It's amazing.
Because at that point, it was pretty much we sold Schecter guitars at that store and the New York store, and it really had no other distribution and was, unfortunately at that point, pretty much a dead brand. But, divine intervention or whatever, luck, she said no, and they told me, "Well, take the stuff." So we kind of shifted gears. I had enough guitars built to do a little 10 by 10 booth, and it was well received. I came back, I remember, from that show with about 5 or 6 distributors in, worldwide, and about a handful of U.S. dealers, but it was certainly a big, big step from where Schecter was at the time. So I was kind of by default given the reins.
Yeah, well, isn't that amazing how, sometimes you don't realize the significance of, things that are unfolding at the time. And, I'm always thinking about that and talking about it a lot, almost incessantly, because I'm so fascinated with it. But let me just digress a little bit here. And before we go on and really get into the sort of the meat and potatoes of Schecter, maybe for those listeners that may not know that much about the history of Schecter, I'm assuming a little something about what what the company was all about, prior to the time you're talking about right now. Is there any, historical significance you could tell us about in the early part of Schecter?
Yeah, Schecter was really started as a replacement part company. I mean, it was, I knew a couple of the original guys. Actually, the gentleman, Herschel Blankenship, that owned Lab Sound, that store I said that I worked at, was one of the original owners of Schecter. So it was really 4 guys that started this small replacement part company, and David Schecter had the best sounding last name. So again, by default. But Schecter at that point, their claim to fame in the beginning was they developed the first dual sound single coil pickup, which is taking a Strat style pickup and winding it, taking a lead, and then continue the winding. So via a push pull switch or a toggle, you can get, a Fender Strat traditional sound and then something a little bit hotter. So that is sort of what put them on the market. But if you rewind into the mid 70s and, remember, no one would play, no guitarist would play a off-the-shelf guitar. You bought something, you immediately had it customized, replaced the pickups, the bridge, the tuners. It was a thing back then. And when you're looking back at that, Fender guitars in the 70s, the kind of the post CBS era guitars were not looked at as being all that well built. Now they're collector's items, but at that point, people were replacing everything in Schecter. I remember as a kid in New Orleans looking at their ads, had ads with just every piece of, hardware, bodies, necks, exotic and heavy. Brass and exotic woods was like the Schecter thing.
And they made tuners too, didn't they?
Yeah,
kind of remember that was one of the things that I really remember about it, and it was Schecter and somebody else.
There was companies, Mighty Might, Stars Guitars, Boogie Bodies. All these companies were kind of filling that void of, it became a kit guitar mentality, and that is actually what worked for Schecter, because there were stores, and one in particular, Rudy's in New York, that had all of the Schecter parts, the bodies, necks, everything, and they began taking and putting together complete guitars from Schecter's parts. And Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits and Pete Townsend from the Who, frequenting that store, and they actually picked up a couple of those guitars that Rudy's had actually assembled, and those became the first guys that started using a complete Schecter-made guitar.
But it wasn't. They weren't called Schecter guitars, though, were they?
Well, Schecter always branded their guitar with on the back of the headstock they had a brand. An iron brand on it that said Schecter. So it was
So it had it on the headstock in the back.
Yeah,
is that where it was?
Yeah, it just wasn't assembled at that point by Schecter, which was in Van Nuys, California. But as soon as that happened, the Schecter crew was smart enough to go shift gears enough to go. It's not just about the replacement parts anymore. There was a market for them to do full guitars, and the first couple of Dire Straits records were all done with Mark Knopfler played a Schecter guitar, and the Who Eminence front video, both Daltrey and Townsend are playing Schecter guitars. So kind of again a lot of Schecter stuff, and my involvement with Schecter was just luck of the draw, right place, right time. It's kind of a cool story when you look back at it, but again, it happened that way for Schecter, that suddenly they were thrust in from going, we just make parts, to now we make guitars.
So when you became involved, let's talk about early on. What were some of the first milestones and maybe some of the challenges that you can remember that were significant in those days?
Well, when I took over, being officially handed the reins were probably 95, 96. And I guess the challenge was probably myself, because I hated the idea that we were looked at as kit guitars, trying to convince dealers and stuff to actually take on Schecter as a line. Most people did remember Schecters being replacement parts, and after about 12 dealers going, you guys make those kit guitars, don't you? We had the reputation of just being expensive Strats and Tellys, and that really bugged me, and it was definitely a detriment at that point, as MTV was popular and the new metal music was coming in, and I just knew that we couldn't survive just making upper end guitars at that point. I mean, several of Schecter employees, Tom Anderson, James Tyler, as the company had collapsed in the late 80s, they pretty much had gone on and did their own companies, doing a lot of what Schecter had pioneered.
And wasn't Pat Wilkins around at some place?
Yeah, Pat was the original painter of Schecter, and even during those times, still painted our guitars. Pat.
He was actually the second interview that I did way back when, and Pat's a good guy.
Yeah, Pat's great, and he's one of the original guys, and I got a lot of my info from him. But so Schecter was actually outdone by some of their own employees, so I knew I had to shift gears and get a younger audience as opposed to the 40 plus guy who could afford a $2,500 guitar at that point. So that's where I started attempting and designing some stuff that shifted Schecter away from just being Strats and Tellys. And I think the first couple of guitars we did, the Tempest, the Avenger, and the Spitfire, which are actually still in our line today, were the first thing I kind of doodled together with tracing paper. And thankfully my luthier was able to take what I was attempting to do and actually turn it into something proper. But we definitely benefited from the MTV market. Being in a band, I knew people in a couple of bands that I were able to bring in, Jay and Sean from White Zombie, Robert DeLeo from Stone Temple Pilots, who actually worked with me at Lab Sound. I was able to get them to come in and try Schecters and actually start playing them on stage. And we certainly benefited by MTV actually at that point really showing and breaking new bands. So we had Jerry in the band Papa Roach, which first record sold, millions. I mean, Jerry played one of our first Diamond Series guitars, because I guess I skipped that part, but realizing that the market, at least for us at that point, wasn't going to just bear really expensive guitars, that we had to find a way to compete in the real guitar world, which was finding a factory in South Korea to take these ideas and make them quality but affordable. And
you were shooting for what price range?
I mean, at that point, $800 to $1,000,
mm-hmm.
and I think we actually hit it really well. Looking back, I think during that time we really changed the landscape and what a guitar in that price point could be. I mean, I feel we were the first company to do that and put upper end parts on it. Seymour Duncan and EMG pickups, Tone Pros, bridges, and made them. I guess I dipped back into the idea of trying to have it where you didn't have to take a guitar that a kid that just bought and then replace everything. We tried to make them stage ready, and I think we set the course that we still follow now, that we were going to sell the exact guitar that the artist played on stage. It wasn't a bait and switch mentality, which from working at Sunset Custom and dealing with some other brands, I really saw this thing of, hey, you're calling this a artist so-and-so model, but you made him a custom guitar, and the one that you're selling to over the counter is a far cry from that.
Yeah,
and I
that's
think,
a really interesting point. Yeah.
But that's something we set our path in the beginning, and we still hold to that, as well as also really setting the guitars up, doing not just a QC, but full fretwork, dressing, just everything to make it off the shelf, ready to walk in stage or studio. And it just hit. Having those bands at that time just propelled us. And the other thing that a milestone I think that was really important in the Schecter beginnings, or at least the re-beginning of Schecter, is that we ended up seeing the relevance of the 7-string guitar. At that point, if you look back in music, two bands in particular, Korn and Limp Bizkit, were very big at that point, and they were doing the heavy drop tune using a 7-string mm-hmm. guitar. Really, there was only one guitar in the market at that point. Ibanez had made a Steve Vai 7-string, which really had the high A string on it because of Vai's playing, the shredding and playing many notes up the neck. But those two bands replaced did it the opposite way, did a low B on it. And that was kind of the basis of their sound. And we were fortunate enough to jump that train early and be the first to market with an affordable 7-string guitar. And what I think that did for us at that first and second NAMM show, when we debuted the Korean guitars, were to have dealers really look at Schecter as a serious new brand, as opposed to being that. And it got us in a lot of stores. It got us into the big chain stores and everything. So the 7-string guitar and that first batch of bands that had a lot of MTV exposure really are a big part of putting Schecter back on the map. Now,
did retailers show any reticence to bringing the 7-string guitars in at all?
No, I think once they saw what it was, I think we did something that I look back that was pretty clever. A lot of dealers were just wanting to purchase the 7-string guitars from us, and we kind of set a policy of, no, you had to bring in the full line, which was affordable at the point. We said you had to buy these 8 pieces. You couldn't and they couldn't all be 7-string guitars. So we kind of we drew our line in the sand a little bit, which worked, which put us in a lot of stores, especially some of those stores that the owners only remembered Schecter from the parts and Pete Towns and stuff like that. And now they come to the Schecter booth, and there was younger guys with long hair, and it was kind of not their dad's Schecter.
Well, you were creating some demand in the market too, I expect, and so some of that demand had to start making itself known to dealers and to some degree. So that probably precipitated, some of it, at least making it a bit easier to get that started. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. At that time, the Papa Roach video for Last Resort was in heavy rotation on MTV, and Jerry played just one of our basic C1 models in the video, and that became a very big selling guitar for us, and still a foundation of our line now.
Can you think of any one really significant challenge that, say during the first 10 years or so that you were there that you had to deal with?
Well, certainly shaking the past off, was a big thing. Like I mentioned, the, kit guitars, and, I remember Schecter, you guys did this, and it is hard to reborn something. I mean, a lot of those great brands that I grew up with, had a similar crash. Schecter wasn't the only one. If you look back, Kramer, BC Rich, Dean, all those guitars were really popular with the hair bands. And I think there's that mentality. You can just have something made overseas and slap your name on the headstock, and the consumer is just going to follow no matter what. And I think that was the undoing of a lot of those brands, and Schecter included. And you watch, and some of them have had a hard time being reborn. And I've always looked at that and went, you don't always get a chance to remake something or have a do-over. Yeah. So we've been very, very cautious of that, and really, try to not separate ourselves from being the kid on the other side of the counter. So holding to your guns is certainly a challenge. Yeah. When something becomes popular, it's really easy to, think, let's just cut some corners and we can ship more. We can have less than, our guitars are a model of the inefficiency, as far as the time that we spend on them. Most companies don't do that. And that became our calling card. And you're always tempted to take a step or two back, for the bottom line. So that's always been a challenge. And, thankfully, my owner stays out of this and lets me kind of, I've made enough more right decisions than wrong. So he lets me kind of guide it. But that temptation is certainly a challenge.
Well, how would you describe the growth of the company? Obviously, it's gone from something very small early on, but maybe say in the last 10 or 12 years, what does that growth picture look like?
I think we're firmly entrenched as a major guitar brand now. I mean, there is always going to be the two, Gibson and Fender, and then everyone else. And I think we're certainly in the electric guitar market, a top 5, top 8, as far as sales and everything. And, there becomes challenges with that. We grew pretty quick. When I talked about those early days, there was really 4 of us working, and, we did everything. And then to have a company, we kind of caught a rocket with those MTV bands and the 7-string, and it just kind of then getting chain wide with Guitar Center and Musician's Friend. And suddenly, it happens quick, and you have to stay ahead of it to take advantage of like an opportunity. And it grew really quick, especially those first 4 and 5 years. And it is a business. You have to learn to, I had no business training, and I sort of learned on the job, and just really tried to always follow the motto of, don't forget being the kid on the other side of the counter, and tried to do everything with that mentality. And it worked. And we grew, and it was, 10 people, then 12, then 16, then 20. And, to the point of now it's 44 people.
Wow. And how big a facility are you working out of now?
We have 2 buildings. They're right next door to each other. The main building is about 14,000 square feet. Most of that's a big warehouse and a setup facility, and we have offices there. And then right across the parking lot, we have, I think it's a 9,000 square foot, and they're both 2-story. And that building houses our custom shop. It houses a photo studio that we try to do as much as we can in-house. And that includes actually taking all of our pictures that have to go up between catalog, everybody's website, things like that. That's all done in-house. And we have our recording studio there that we do, all our social media interviews and things like that there. So yeah, it's 2 buildings. We stepped right outside of Burbank about 4 years ago in order to actually paint in-house. California has some very stringent
That's right.
emission laws, and in Burbank, the facility that we had, even though it was a little more centrally located, we were just never going to get approved to paint. And we were actually sending guitars out to Pat and another gentleman to paint, which doesn't become the most efficient all the time. So we moved about 3 miles to Sun Valley, really a couple of exits down the freeway, which allowed us, it was zoned for manufacturing. So we're now able to, we have a paint booth in-house and able to do everything there.
So you have a mix. You're making some guitars in the USA, and then you're obviously importing a more sizable part of the line, I would imagine, at this point.
Oh, yeah. The Diamond series, which is what the import guitars, which are mostly South Korea, even though we're starting to do a bit more in Indonesia, as their quality is actually coming up to the quality of South Korea. And, South Korea's pricing is starting to get a bit out of hand. So you have to continue to move. But thankfully, we've been able to stay pretty much out of China. But yeah 90% of our guitars are from the Diamond series. But we do have the side of our company that does the USA production guitars, and then totally one-of-a-kind handmade Masterworks guitars. And another thing we do a lot of in that building, we kind of do a step back to Schecter's beginning, is that we are winding our own pickups, which was a big part of Schecter's, early days. So we do a full line of our humbuckers and single coils that are not only in our USA guitars, we also send them to Korea and Indonesia that actually end up in a lot of our Diamond series.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let me do something that's kind of parallel and talk a little bit about you. And my sense is that you're probably not the average sort of stereotype CEO. Just a guess. And,
I'll take that as a compliment.
Assuming that, I'm wondering how you would describe your style of management, and then with that, how does that relate to the Schecter company culture?
Like I said,
it's a two-parter, I guess. I don't know.
I had no formal business training. I did go to college and everything, but that was never, I didn't study business or anything. I just looked at. I loved guitars. I loved the parts. I loved the concept behind it. And again, it's that mentality that we set in the beginning, which was, not forgetting. That you were on the other side of the counter and be treating people like you wanted to be treated. And it just kind of fell into place that way. We have, I think when bands and for the most part dealers, even some were a little bit like put off that we didn't look like the typical company. I certainly know it worked in our favor and still does. I think when an artist, a band, or someone comes to Schecter and they see, they hear loud music playing, I've always looked the same. My wardrobe is pretty much black cutoff T-shirts, and, that's just who I am. I'm not going to pretend to be something different. And I have another 43 people there that are pretty much the same way. They're musicians. They're proud of what they do. We've always had a sticker that goes on the back of a guitar that's set up that a guy puts his number on it. That guitar was set up by Todd, and and there's an element of pride when that goes out the door. And I think it's just the culture is a lot more inviting to a musician or to visit Schecter, and I think that's worked in our favor. I think you have to, at least to me, it comes off a bit phony if I was running this. I went, I played guitar a little bit in high school, and then I went to business school, and I'm selling widgets that just happen to be guitars. I don't know if Schecter would have had a rebirth, if we would have had that mentality, or if it would have went a different direction. And I mean, I'm proud of what we do. I mean, we have a full contingent. I mean, I have my own built-in focus group. If you go in my setup room, I have, my QC guy and production manager, Todd, loves, really insane guitar players, and that's his thing. And then Colin is my punk rock guy. And I mean, then I have a couple of my metal shred setup guys that are just love that style. So when we come out with something new, we really have a really good cross section to draw from if we are onto something right. Mm-hmm. And I think it's definitely a benefit and a something that I don't know if other companies follow. I think Schecter definitely made the big guys take notice, and which is great, because I think they needed a kick in the ass, and I think we had the boot to do that. Yeah. But it just seemed to work, and I love having a job that I on most days love going into. I mean, it is a business, and we do business in California, so it's still, I do have to, sometimes people think I just, because my office has tons of guitars, guitar effect pedals, all my Saints memorabilia. And yeah, it's from the outside, you walk in, it's like, oh yeah, you must just get to sit around and play guitar all day. I mean, I wish that was the case. I'm sitting here, it's in California, so I have to sit there and be handed, hey, this is insurance premiums, and this is, this is, all the new regulations with CITES and Proposition 65, and it's like
that's a whole set of challenges into its own. Those are the modern day challenges that.
It is a set of challenges, and we have our guitars made in South Korea, which up until maybe recently, had a country, 30 miles from our factory, like threatening to bomb them into oblivion. And then our other factory is Indonesia, which is basically on a volcanic island. So, it's sort of a game of risk. You're sitting here playing going, wow, let's wake up today. Okay, no war in Korea and no earthquake or volcano in Indonesia.
Well, at least you're spreading your risk out a little bit and probably having that sort of co-location type of thing. If one went down, at least you could still make some guitars someplace. But it's stuff that people don't think of that come with the territory, but it does. And like I said, it is a business. I do need to show a profit. It has to be profitable. I mean, my owner is very believes in what we do, but you gotta feed it, basically. So yeah, there's definitely more than playing guitar involved, but the most of the time it's cool. I mean, we play practical jokes. I mean, it's a fun environment. So you go there, people for the most part have an opportunity to really come and enjoy working there. Yeah, I mean, I go back, and when I wasn't working at a music store, when I moved out here, I did a stint actually doing carpet cleaning, and which again, we were just out here, and we're trying to keep an apartment, we're trying to pay to go into the studio and everything, so I had to make money, so I got a job doing that, and we would get shows, and we'd have to be at a club at 3:00 to sound check. And if you're doing a job that you're not it's not your company, I mean, I had multiple times I had to fake being sick, even to the point of actually sticking my hand down my own throat to make myself get sick, to go, hey, I really need to go home, just to make sound check, to go from Van Nuys to Santa Monica. And I think one thing we wanted to do here, I mean, it's definitely in Schecter's culture and beneficial that people do play in bands, that they do shows, that they do record. So I try to really remember having to do that, and we're very
accommodating. Let's say when someone that works for us has a show or is going into the studio and stuff like that. I'd never want someone to have to feel the need to feign a sickness just to make sound check. And
employee retention, in the real technical term, is important. And the longer you can keep good people, the better it is for you, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, we probably have a third of our staff is well past 10 years at the company, and yeah, I mean, it's easy to say, hey, I want guys in bands and stuff, and it's the next thing to actually allow them to really do that. And I think we've done real well at allowing that.
Yeah. Let me something else that kind of interests me, and in case some folks don't know, Schecter Guitars and ESP Guitars operate under the same ownership, and my sense has always been that there must be some competition there or whatever. And I'm just kind of interested to know how all that works.
Yeah, me too sometimes. Yeah, let's just say a little competition. In the beginning, we actually shared an office,
wow.
Which is, I think the analogy I would use is if the New York Giants and New York Jets, I only use that because New Orleans only has one football team, which happens to be the best in the NFL. But having two competing teams share a locker room and a practice facility, and then on Sunday play each other.
Yeah.
So,
that's great. That's a great one.
There used to be some pretty tense moments back in the early days, but as both companies grew and we separated facilities, we compete for the most part for the same audience. I do think Schecter has a wider net as far as styles of guitars we do, which does go back to where Schecter came from. But for the most part, people do look at, if you're new to the guitar world and you're looking at a hard rock guitar, you're probably looking at a Schecter or an ESP if you have no real brand affiliation or anything. But yeah, it's I would look back at Mr. Shibuya's style on that, because we've had some pretty heated exchanges on for various things, and I think he's always kind of chuckled about it, because I do think maybe it's a Japanese cultural thing that maybe it makes us work harder to outdo each other. But
interesting strategy, yeah.
Yeah, he also owns Musicians Institute. Right, he owns a Japanese TV station. So, I mean, he's definitely diverse as far as what he owns. But having two guitar companies, and I do think it definitely works, because I think both guitar companies have made their mark in the world. In my opinion, one a bigger mark, but that's just because I have a vested interest. Yeah, but yeah, it's different. I don't know if any other owner could actually make that work. I think an American owner would probably have decided that it's in their best interest to kind of have one dissolve into the other one and have it be a division of, and share resources and share facilities and everything. But this could not be done any more separate. And in the beginning, it used to really bug me, for lack of, a radio term, for having to use a radio term. Yeah. But, to have people say that ESP made Schecter guitars, which just simply isn't true and has never been true.
So we're dispelling a rumor, right?
Yeah, I think that rumor is hopefully long gone. Yeah. But, one interesting tidbit that people probably aren't aware of is that ESP also started a year later as a replacement part company.
I've heard that. Yeah, that's interesting.
He pretty much, Mr. Shibuya pretty much looked at the origins of Schecter when Schecter was the king of the replacement parts. And actually, that's what ESP, Electric Sound Products, was. They came to the United States and opened a place in New York, and it was replacement parts, necks, bodies, pickups, everything like that. And, they didn't have the crash that the American brands did. They took a different route and grew slowly, but the American brands, like I mentioned, Hamer, BC Rich, Schecter, crashed, and Mr. Shibuya, was thankfully purchased the brand or the name for a song and brought it back and allowed it to actually start over, and thankfully allowed me to have the reins and put the belief in me to kind of guide that.
Well, I'm thinking in the 2 decades or so, probably a little more, that you've been at Schecter, you've undoubtedly seen many changes, as all of us have, beyond just your own company. And I'd like to, at some point, kind of talk a little bit about macro issues. So I'd like to hear a little bit from your sort of broader industry perspective, maybe what you see as the biggest challenges ahead, and maybe what are the opportunities, if at all, on that bigger scale, sort of an industry-wide, I can say it easy for me to say, industry-wide basis.
I think the challenge is always the popularity of the electric guitar in music. As bands come and go, the guitar has always enjoyed more or less popularity in music. But I think now the big challenge is that when I was, as we talked about, when I was a kid, my choice was football or guitar. I think now there is so much other outside interference or opportunities or distractions for somebody that's 13 or 14, that the guitar is, instead of being one of 2 or 3 things that someone could pick up as a hobby, let's use that term, there's a lot more. I didn't have all the video games. I didn't have, photography. I didn't have cycling, skateboarding, all those different things that it takes to actually commit to being a musician or a guitarist. And I think because it's almost, in a way, it's become easier to make music, and this may be getting a little broader, but how easy it is to now record yourself and everything. It makes it, I think there's parts of that's cool, and there are some interesting and great musicians that maybe wouldn't have been discovered 20 years ago. I didn't have the money to go into a studio or anything, but it puts out so much, and I think you don't have to be as vested in the art of music or guitar. And I think if you don't vest yourself, it's easy to just put it down and go on to the next hobby or interest. And I think that's a big challenge. There's a lot of guitar companies now. I think people think it's really easy. Let's just have something made overseas and put it out. There's a lot of copying. Someone will we have so many variants of our guitars done by new guitar companies that think it's really going to be just easy. But what that does is dilute the market even more. So, I often wonder, looking like, where do all those guitars go? For the most part, they're not like a PC computer. They don't just stop working, and I look at, on a Friday when we're shipping massive quantities of guitars out, I often wonder, where do they all go? Where is there that many people playing? So that's certainly a challenge. I think the, guitar companies in general collectively want guitar music to continue to be popular. And, it gets less and less like having the guitar heroes that we had in the 80s. We're fortunate to have a few of them on our roster: Sinister Gates, Nick Johnson, Keith Merrow, guys that actually do influence, an upstart player to buy a guitar. But, it's and thankfully, we also work with Zach Weil, who's probably from his 80s, 90s generation, certainly one of the biggest guitar heroes in the world. But there's getting less and less of that people are dubbed, a hero or a influencer in that. And I think that is certainly needed to continue to propel this industry forward. And, the other challenges are some of the things we talked about before, the CITES and that whole Rosewood thing that just for almost 2 years, I think, really put the brakes on the industry and made it, which isn't as big of the music industry, especially the guitar industry, isn't as big as I think people, when you look at the overall dollar, isn't anywhere near like Apple or some other industries like that. So when something comes and disrupts it, even like the CITES things, which was certainly meant to stop deforestation and was really meant to curtail the Chinese and Asian furniture manufacturers that just would mow down rainforests to make tables and things out of endangered wood. It kind of filtered down to the simple rosewood stuff, which all of our rosewood is actually grown and harvested from farms that are replanted. But to suddenly throw this another level and layer of bureaucracy on a business, that was tough. That made bringing product in. We sat there and had to look at alternative woods and things like that. Guitar players, they want to hear maple, rosewood, and ebony. They're not so interested in finding some other species that they can't even pronounce to be their fingerboards. And thankfully, I think the rules have lessened some, or we've just figured out how to navigate the mounds of paperwork. But that was certainly a big challenge over the last few years.
And do you have anything on the opportunity side or the positive side? Do you see anything that, and after all that, generally speaking, that goes in the up direction?
Yeah, it's definitely not doom and gloom. You just with anything, if you're running a business or anything, you have to figure a way to navigate it and come out the other end. And I think we have, and I think most of the guitar industry has. And we experienced for last year double-digit growth, which in this economic climate is certainly positive. We're not selling a necessity, so any growth, I think, is wonderful. But I think the guitar business is certainly on an upswing. I think we kind of hedge ourselves, and I think we have some security because not only are we selling to some players like First Guitar, but we also do a lot of, I guess you would say, niche guitars that become people's third, fourth, or fifth, or sixth guitar. So I think that's always been a strong point of Schecter, because not everyone does. We do multiple electric 12 strings. We do 9-string guitars. We do 6-string basses. We do guitars with sustainiacs. There's a lot of things, and I think that comes from my love of recording and everything, that or different tools for people to use in various things. So I think that just sort of widens our net in our market. I think for what's to be real honest, Schecter is probably known as a hard rock guitar company, and that a lot has to do with the bands that we have and everything, or at least the one, what's put out to the public. But, for being a company that has that mentality or that, with the public perception, we're pretty varied. I think that Schecter, if you would just own the music store and the only brand you had was Schecter, that you could probably appease 90% of the people that walk in the door. We do big semi-hollow guitars. We do a lot of variety, and not a lot of companies have as wide of an artist roster as us, that we can go from Cheap Trick to a Both or the Neville Brothers to In This Moment, and we're really pretty varied. And I think that does go back to where Schecter started. I think some companies that were born in the 80s and being the pointy guitars, pretty much. I don't mean that in a disrespect.
No, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
I think it's really hard to break out of that and look like BC Rich. If they try to do something that's out of the Warlock or that type of shape or that platform, chassis, they looked at like, what are they doing? And Schecter is blessed to kind of not have those limitations on. And I do think, as much as I fought the Fender kit guitar mentality the early days, I think it set this non-limitation that I think I've learned to use to our benefit. And I don't think there is much we could do that looks like being a fish out of water, or why are we trying that? And that's certainly a positive.
Well, you mentioned something a few sentences ago about your love of recording. So let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about Michael Ciravolo, the artist, guitar player, producer, family guy. In other words, let's get a little personal. First, you've just recently released a new album that I know that you're very proud of, and for good reason. And I've listened to a lot of it, and it's good music. And I thought maybe you could tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, that's what my initial love was. And thankfully, this job has put me in a position to meet and become friends with a lot of great artists. And I think if you can't lose sight of why you got into this business, like I said before, I wanted to be the guy on stage, and I've done my share of playing in front of 10, 15,000 people, and I've done my share of playing in front of 3 people. Mm-hmm. But, if you're going to make a product and sell it, I think to stand behind it, you have to actually use it. And I've certainly gone through my share of ups and downs with the guitar as a instrument versus the guitar as my livelihood. And, I've wrestled with that. And over the past few years, I've definitely come out the other end, and my love of the guitar and recording has certainly resurfaced. I've never been a virtuoso guitar player. I'm not particularly technically proficient, but I do have a style. And I think, and doing this record was a way of putting that all together again. I've done plenty of records before, but this one was really totally on me as far as the songwriting, and I'm the only guitarist on it. And it was certainly a challenge I put forth to myself. There's a lot of textures on this record that people, I think, when they look in the liner notes, will see that no synthesizers were used, mm-hmm. which is a line I nicked from the early Queen records that I'm really proud of. But,
and people, I think we should mention the name of the album is Finding Beauty in Chaos.
Yeah, that's the record name, and the project is called Beauty and Chaos. And like I said, it started as what would have been a solo record per se, but this is so far, this is light years away from what you would expect from when a guitar player usually says solo record. I've always thought Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, millions of notes, and and hey, they can do that. I can't. But this turned into something I hope is going to be a continuing entity that I just look at myself as being the curator of.
That's a very interesting term to be used in this. I saw that several times. Very interesting term to use.
Well, I was able to bring in some extremely, amazing singers, and a lot of people that were a big part of my record collection. The first song we did when I was still trying to see if this could actually happen, we had Robin Zander come into our studio at Schecter and sing the track. And it's hard to sit there and not fall back to being the kid that had Cheap Trick posters on the wall and remembered, Surrender and Dream Police and Live at Budokan, and have him treat me as a contemporary, and goes in there and blasts out the song, comes back in and sits down on the couch and goes, "What do you think?" And you sit there and you start, it's hard not to go, wow, you're the guy who sang Surrender, as opposed to going, hey man, I think you're on this line, I think you were a little flat. So there were a lot of cool moments. in doing the record. I was able to have my wife Tish. She played bass on 2 songs. She also sang a track that we just finished a video of. I pulled my kids in some kind of way and had them do hand claps. And the funny thing is, after all these cool people from, Simon from The Cure, Wayne from The Mission, and just these people that are on there, the only person that even they raised their eyebrows and thought was cool was that Ice-T actually did a part on it. And that was the only thing that actually had any kind of movement in them, like, oh, Dad, Ice-T, that's pretty cool. But I'm thrilled. It's out. We're doing videos. I'm working on a remix album that a lot of different producers and engineers are kind of reaching out, wanting to do their reinterpretations of the songs. And I hope it's something that continues and that I can pull in more singers. And maybe the next record I'm looking at changing the limitations that I placed on it. This one being I'm the only guitar player and no keyboards. I think limitations can be a creative tool. So I'm looking forward to maybe the next record, bringing in some of my guitar playing friends that are certainly a lot better players than me, and having them involved. Maybe put them in some situations that's a little out of their comfort zone stylistically or something, and seeing what we can get. But I'm thrilled that this happened, and I guess I look back and going, I don't know if a lot of people that are in my role still do this, and I feel blessed and fortunate that I've have the opportunity and still enjoy doing this.
I think we should also you mentioned your wife Tish Ciravolo, and for those that listen to the show regularly, they'll know that a few weeks back, we interviewed her for a very, very interesting interview about her work and creating Daisy Rock guitars, and quite an interesting story. So I'm sure you're quite proud of that. And I understand you had some involvement with that as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, back in the beginning, which God, it should probably kill me if I don't know the dates. I know it was the early 2000s. I mean, she had the idea. We had our daughter Nicole did this little sketch, and she kind of just had this brainstorm of what if we did a guitar for a girl, because I'm sure she went into her issues with finding an instrument that felt right. And, it was an obvious issue in the guitar world. And she came with the idea is brilliant. And, I was fortunate enough to be in the position to help design it. I mean, the guitar neck that was on the first Daisy Rocks is the same shape as the neck that we did on Prince's guitars. I mean, Prince has small hands, and we kind of took that scope of going, and taking her idea, and we're able to help bring that to market. I still remember those first couple of NAMM shows that she was actually a division of Schecter, with people walking by and just kind of laughing at the guitars in the beginning. It's a pink guitar, it's shaped like a flower, it's this and that. And I remember walking the NAMM show next year, and suddenly pink became the new black.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, she talked about that. It was very, very interesting stuff.
Yeah, most of those companies won't cop to it, but suddenly they all had been making girl guitars for years, which was kind of a load of crap and everything. But yeah, it's cool. We had a lot of guitar talk in our family, which isn't always, we don't always agree on everything with that, but I was fortunate that we were able to help her bring that to market. And I think she kind of revolutionized the industry with that.
Well, she's a very unique, kind of a one-of-a-kind operation. And I would just encourage our listeners, if you haven't listened to that interview, go back and listen to it. I mean, it's fun, and she's just a lot of fun to listen to, and plus very knowledgeable and really articulate. But finally, you told me the other day that, and I think I heard this from her too, that your kids have gone off to college. And having gone through that experience myself, I'm assuming that that's changed things up a bit. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, we're a small but very tight family. I mean, it's my parents have been passed, and Tish doesn't have really any family here. Her mom lives in Hawaii, so we're small. I mean, our friends have been our family, and being suddenly after 18 and 20 years just blinking and being empty nest in a week period is a bit of a jolt. Thank God for FaceTime. I don't know if this would have been back in 5 or 10 years ago where it was just a phone call or writing a letter.
Yeah, that's right. Isn't that right? It's quite different now. I know I have my son is in Tennessee, and fortunately with this technology that it doesn't seem like they're far away. And
yeah, it definitely makes it a little easier. I just was thinking the other night, it's been almost 3 months since I've seen our oldest, who is further away. She's in New York, but they're both coming back for Thanksgiving. But
nice.
I think it turns into, I mean, the great thing is that besides, loving my wife, you have to like your wife too, because now there is a lot more time we're spending together and stuff like that. But, doing this record together and doing the videos and everything has certainly filled in some of the time. Talking about doing the next stuff. Also, she's brought a couple of new Daisy Rock ideas to me that I'm trying to help her suss out and everything. So, there's things that have actually helped fill a void, I mean, which is certainly being a father and their daughter's gone a big void. But this record couldn't have come along at a better time. I think I'm not quite sure if I would be handling it as well. And if you ask my kids, I'm not handling it that well.
Well, I'm sure they're quite proud of both of you. And, there's change is constant. We always talk about that. And sometimes we just have to get used to it, but always keeping the sort of the positive view of things, looking at it like, okay, well, this is just a new set of opportunities and to, live life, and it doesn't diminish anything else. It just gives you more in some way if you look at it that way.
Yeah, Dad knows he has to continue to work hard because he's got 2 college educations to pay for. And it's certainly back of the mind motivation and everything. I mean, continue to put my heart and soul into keeping Schecter going. The other thing, not to jump back so much to the record, but, my goal also in that, besides the creative outlet, is to try to get some of the songs in TV and movies. That's been a side of me. The idea of scoring something has always been of interest to me. And one of my dear friends, Tyler Bates, is, an amazing scorer, and he's pretty much at the top of the game doing Guardians of the Galaxy and Sucker Punch and John Wick. I mean, he's world class. I've definitely getting some tips and stuff from him. We had a song from this record in the Purge, the TV show. So there's definitely motivations across the board.
With all that stuff going on, that's certainly going to give us opportunity to talk about some other things down the road. And I always like to think that, we'll have people back and try to compare notes a little bit from where we've gone. But, we've gone a little bit over on time, but it's absolutely worth it. What a great interview, and so much detail and good information. I think, we're going to get a lot of interest on this. But I'm really appreciative of you to take the time on a Saturday morning to come on with us.
I appreciate you taking, not only speaking to my wife earlier, but also myself today. And, I think there's some interesting elements to the Schecter story. And I think if it just tells anybody anything, that, life does take you on a path. It may not always be what you think it's going to be, but there is a plan. And wherever you head, just go for it with everything you got.
Well, that's exactly how I end the show, with a sentiment very similar to that. And if you want to know what that is, listen to the back of the show, and you'll get it. It's good listening. But at any rate, Michael, thanks again so much, and I look forward to talking to you in the very near future.
Well, thank you very much, Jeffrey.
Take care. So what did you think of the interview with Michael? We always want to hear from you, and you can connect with us through our contact page on the website at guitarbusinessradio.com or on Facebook and Twitter at Guitar Business, or email us directly at contact@guitarbusinessradio.com. And as usual, if all else fails, just call us on our GBR hotline at 888-777-2404. God, I love saying that. Stop what you're doing. Do that right now. Well, it was a long interview, but there was really a lot there. That's the thing I really like about this show, that we're able to offer a platform that allows guests to talk about the things that are really meaningful to them, business or personal, because after all, they're always both intertwined. Plus, we're not asking most of the usual unexpected questions that you often get elsewhere. Although if you listen to this show a lot, then you've probably come to expect, or at least anticipate, the kinds of questions that we ask and the depth that we're looking for. One of the things Michael referred to on more than one occasion was his ability and the necessity to, as he put it, stand on the other side of the counter. It's a great metaphor, and it describes the importance of understanding your customers, their interests, their needs, and how they view things. And that firmly translates to a better connection with your market in general and offers you a much clearer path to being more market-driven. And that's important. All too often, entrepreneurs create products and services that they're in love with. The fascination can be powerful, if not overwhelming. Folks are going to love this thing because I love it, and I know what I'm doing. And my friends and family love it. And people who want to sell me stuff to make it and market it, well, they love it too. We're going to sell a ton of these things and make a fortune. You heard this before? Seen this before? Done this before? What's the most common result of this kind of thinking? You know the answer. Disappointment, frustration, or even worse, denial. What happens then? Again, most of us know the answer. Another folder in the research and development file, where we've reclassified all the things we used to think of as failures, but often that's what it is. So when you have the ability to step out of your body and walk around to the other side of the counter, like you used to see in those old movies, remember that? It was kind of like an out-of-body experience. But really, it's just all in your head that this happens, but clearly it has worked for Michael Ciravolo. Look at the success of Schecter. He may not look the part, but that part is irrelevant. When it comes down to what's important to running a substantial business like this, it's the common sense management strategies that make the difference. And you can see that over 2 decades where Michael has not lost focus on the things that matter most. So that puts me in an ideal situation to follow up with this. Stay positive, stay focused on the destination, but keep all your options open on how you're going to get there. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again on episode 41. And that's it for this episode of Guitar Business Radio. Thanks for being with us. You can stay tuned and stay in touch at guitarbusinessradio.com.